is it that the people that we adore the most, the people that we quote the most, go through so much pain before they become successful? Like, has that ever rung in your mind? Think about somebody like Oprah Winfrey, for example. They said that she was too poor, she was too dark, but, you know, all around the world today, she's known as this great figure. How did she go from pain to where she is now? Or what did her pain have to do with her success? That is a real question. And then we can think about somebody else like Tyler Perry. He definitely went through the mud with being homeless. And now this is a person who has networks and TV show on TV show. And he's pretty popular around the world for different things, but mainly filmmaking. And really, his story comes from someone who was going through a lot of pain. And he still became something great. What if the pain that you're facing right now in your life is part of a preparation? What if it's not a setback, but a setup for something greater? What if, really just stop and think about that. Because I know a lot of us, for different reasons, are enduring pain. We're going through hardship. We're going through trauma. We're going through grief. Whatever it might be, we're all going through something. But have you ever thought for 2 seconds, what if what I'm going through is preparing me for something greater in the near future? Even though your suffering is hard, it's not wasted. And I want to go ahead and navigate through how pain can translate into our purpose later on. Because sometimes pain just seems irrelevant. Like, why do we have to go through this? Why are we encountering this? But sometimes that pain is the catalyst to purpose in your life. Let's talk about Joseph, right? Joseph was someone in the Bible who I believe was betrayed and forgotten, right? Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers because they were jealous of him. Joseph was a dreamer, right? Joseph was sold into slavery. Joseph was locked in a prison. Joseph endured more hardship in the beginning of his life than I really feel like he should have gone through. But that is a part of his story. So I can't judge his story because the ending is the greatest, right? So one thing I can say about Joseph in this whole story, if I remember reading correctly, he never stopped trusting in God. Even though he knew he wasn't wrong and he probably didn't understand what was going on, he still trusted God in that situation. So, because he never stopped trusting in God, God came through for him. And when the time came, Joseph went from a prisoner to a palace, right? And he was the second in command in Egypt at the time. So Genesis 50 verse 20 says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Sometimes in certain situations, things do have the intention to harm us. But God may have a different plan. Like I was saying in the beginning, your pain may have a purpose. It may feel really bad right now, but God may be setting you up for something greater. Imagine this guy went from being a prisoner, living in a palace, being second in command in Egypt. Very big transition if you ask me. And if we were to translate that to modern day, it would almost seem like that's something that would never happen. Almost like a miracle of some sort. But Joseph's suffering, it made him wise. It made him humble. And it made him strong enough to lead a nation. And he was still able to turn around and forgive the people who hurt him. Imagine his own blood threw him in a pit. It happens, y'all. It happens. But his pain was for a purpose, because in the end, he was able to save his family. I honestly should have mentioned Jesus first, because that's a story worth noting. That is a colossal story. But Jesus was betrayed by his very own disciples. And because of that betrayal, Jesus was mocked, beaten, nailed to a cross. He was laughed at. He was ridiculed. I mean, he really went through it. And the craziest part about Jesus, he was sinless. He didn't even do nothing to end up in that position. But his pain on the cross gave us salvation for the entire world. So the pain he endured was for his purpose. You see where I'm going with this? Like, maybe someone who would be in Jesus' position, if they were the ones bearing, themselves on the cross and going through that, they probably wouldn't understand why they're going through it. Of course, thank God we don't have to bear things like that in this life. But sometimes when we're going through pain, we try to understand, okay, why does this hurt so much? What's going on? Sometimes we don't even do anything wrong, but we still end up in situations that we feel like we don't deserve to be in this. Like, what's going on? Why is this happening to me? But Jesus' resurrection proves that the pain never got the final say. It was the purpose that ended everything. And it's the same thing for Joseph. It wasn't the pain of the slavery and going to prison that got the final say. It was his purpose, where he went from being a prisoner to being in a palace. So let's keep it a buck. Nobody enjoys suffering. And I'm not talking about the suffering that you go through at the gym because you're stretching your muscles and it feels good because you're sore. I'm not talking about that kind of pain. I'm talking about the pain that leaves you mentally debilitated. The pain that leaves you confused, uncomfortable, disoriented, lonely. You know what I'm saying? Like, pain that really leaves you in a position like, what's going on? But again, we come back to our main focal point of why pain can turn into purpose. Let's turn to Romans 5, verse 3 and 4. So Romans 5, verse 3 and 4. It says, and not only that, but we also rejoice in our afflictions, because we know that affliction produces endurance. Endurance produces proven character, and proven character produces hope. In other words, suffering is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new version of you. Someone who could be stronger, wiser, more passionate, or whatever it is that God is inflicting that pain on you to teach you. All right, so I know you came here to find out why suffering makes you exceptional. 1, resilience. You survive what other people were unable to survive. You cried in silence. Nobody even knew what you were going through, but you still rose up. Okay, you still showed up for work. You still showed up for family. You still showed up for friends. You still showed up for events. You still showed up to church. May I mention more? Another thing is compassion. Now your heart is tender because you know what it's like. You know what it's like to go through pain. So, for example, I was talking to a friend of mine about how sometimes it's hard to relate to others about death. Maybe I'll share with them that my mom passed away, and they'll literally say, like, I can't imagine the pain that you went through because I haven't been through that. And it's true. They can't imagine that because they haven't been through it. But how much more for someone who's actually been through something? Now you have that heart because you've endured that type of pain. You've endured that type of grief, right? So now you can feel for people who have been overlooked in the past. Because now you're not just an onlooker, but you are now a part of this thing, this movement, because you've endured it, okay? And to me, that's not even a weakness type of thing. That's depth. That's real depth. To be able to relate to someone who's also been through the fire like you. Another part of suffering that makes you exceptional is your vision. Suffering opens your eyes. It clears your eyes too in some cases. But suffering changes your perspective, the way you look at things, the way you see things. Because when you come up out of that and you know what you've been through, you definitely do see life in a different way. You see others in a different way. You see others with a new set of eyes. So now your vision is different. Your vision is not the same as it was before because you've never been through what you went through. All right. Another thing is God dependency. When you land in a position of suffering, that is a place for you to bond with God. Because when you're suffering and there's no solution for what you're going through, you have absolutely no choice but to depend on God. And that makes you God dependent during that time. So when you become God dependent, this is sometimes where you're able to access his power. Let's turn to 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. It says here, But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. I think I've been talking about this verse a lot. It is not until you are weak until his strength can be shown within you. So if you become God dependent because of your suffering, you may just see that power that he's talking about in 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9. Because when we're suffering, 9 times out of 10, we're in a very weak place. So you, my friend, you have a choice today. You can either let the pain break you, or you could let God build you through that pain. We have to normalize to stop asking God, why me? And instead say, God, what are you doing through me in this process of my pain? So I don't really normally ask questions like this, but I want to know from you in the audience, what has suffering taught you? I want you to drop it in the comments, because maybe your comment can help someone else to heal through the suffering that they are now going into. And we don't want to be selfish with our blessings from God. So if you've gone through your pain and you're walking in your purpose right now, share your story with somebody else, because it really can help them along the way. And position your mindset to think like this: you're not going through it, you're growing through it. Okay? Keep going. Keep being blessed. I know this life is not easy, y'all. I'm not coming on here to tell you that it is, but I am telling you to trust in God. Trust in his unfailing hand. Trust in his word. Trust that he will bring you out. Trust that he will take you from pain to purpose. God bless you and have a wonderful day.